I'm going to ask you three basic perimeters of looking at COVID.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about it with me politically.
Okay.
I want you to talk about it with me from a faith standpoint.
Yep.
And then I want you to talk to me about it from a personal standpoint, how it impacted you, how it impacted your family,
Okay.
and how it has impacted your family 5 years out. So 5 years back, I want you to tell me the impact on Wade Kapszukiewicz from a politician. What did you feel? What did you fear? And what did you feel was necessary for you to do?
Well, I can say that I remember when my thinking changed on this. It was on a phone call I was on with the governor. And, you know, it was maybe the second week of March. The governor got in the habit of having daily phone calls with the big city mayors in Ohio. And it was, you know, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, but also Toledo, Dayton, and Akron. So the 6 big city mayors, the governor, a lot of times the lieutenant governor, Husted at the time, was on the call, and then Amy Acton, Dr. Acton was always on the call. And he started doing those calls, they were noon every day, maybe that second week of March. And I will confess that up until that point, while I was aware of COVID,
Were you told things? Were you asked things in those calls?
a little bit of both. It was a
Okay.
little bit of both. My attitude up until then, so through the first 2 months of the year, you know, I had heard of COVID. I, you know, was dimly aware of it. But I'll be honest, you know, in my judgment, I'm like, oh yeah, that's some disease that's happening out there in California somewhere. It didn't feel present in my life at that time. Then the governor starts setting up these phone calls, and he was taking it serious. And so, okay, maybe I had a little more focus on it. But I distinctly remember, this might have been March 12th or so, we were on one of those calls, and the governor just adopted an attitude and a seriousness that I was not prepared for. He said, look, however bad any of you think this is going to be, it's going to be 10 times worse. And he started talking about MASH units outside hospitals. He was talking in terms of the imagery of body bags. And I remember where I was and stopping in my tracks saying, oh my goodness, this is a little more serious than I thought. And at the very least, it had the governor's attention. And so that is the moment where I toggled in my mind from, this is, and I wonder how much this will affect us, to, oh my goodness, the governor of my state thinks that there are going to be body bags and MASH units. This is a crisis. We can debate whether that was accurate or not. You know, he had his own political disagreements with his own Republicans down at the legislature, who, as time went on, sought to take power away from him and from Dr. Acton for, you know, ideological reasons. But at that moment in time, there is no question that he was someone who, to me, raised that first alarm bell. And actually, when you look at it historically, you look at all of the states and all of the governors of the state, he might have been, I think the governor of Maryland came out early and strong, but he might have been one of the loudest voices. So the way those calls went, first of all, they shared a lot of information. Here's what that's when Dr. Acton would talk. Here's what we're hearing about the disease and how it works and, you know, mutates, et cetera. Here's what we're thinking about doing. But then the governor was very good about asking us, we're thinking about doing this. How would your city react to that? How would distancing requirements work? How do we handle daycares and, you know, shutting down business, these businesses or that business, et cetera, et cetera. So
how fast did you have to grow up? And I'm not saying from a standpoint of maturity. I'm saying from a standpoint of being in the position you were in and hearing these things and thinking, I got to put my big boy pants on for this and get into motion.
Well, I think I was ready for the moment and had been ready for the moment.
Even something unprecedented like this?
I felt that I have been preparing my whole life to be mayor. Not that I've wanted to be mayor my whole life, but I think I have been preparing my whole life to be in a public service role that would prepare me for anything. This was different. This was serious, but I didn't feel as though, boy, I need to get my act together and figure. No. My style is that I'm always serious and thoughtful and ready for anything. I knew this was important, but I didn't feel like I was I guess I didn't approach it that way. I knew based on that phone conversation with the governor that this was really serious, and so very soon, as in that day, we started activating our system up here, our emergency system, our partnership with the county commissioners, our safety teams, our health teams, and we got on it right away. And so those calls with the governor were every day at noon, and that was to give us a heads up to what he was, because remember, he and Dr. Acton got into the habit of, I think, a 2:30 news conference, and he wanted us...
Holding a couple over at the University of Toledo,
Yep.
in fact.
He wanted us to sort of have a couple hours to be prepared to help, just get the word out. But then we locally got into the pattern where we had updates over at the emergency management center over at sort of Jefferson and 23rd. I think the seriousness, even if maybe we didn't understand how serious this was the last week of February, by the second week of March, there was no question that we understood how serious this was, and we brought the energy and resources to bear on it. I suppose we could all look back and say, well, what could we have done differently? Should we have done things differently? I genuinely and honestly believe that I don't know that I would have made any decisions different than the ones I made based on the information we had at the time. There was no playbook for this. There hadn't been anything like this in the country in 100 years since the Spanish flu or the influenza outbreak of 1916, 17, 18. No one was alive when that happened. So we were all sincerely doing the best we could to listen to health professionals, to try to get feedback from businesses and how this would affect them. I remember, frankly, a conversation I had with Joe Napoli. Boy, it might have been the day before this all blew up, where he was worried about the walleye. I can't remember if maybe they're playing. It would have been a little early for the playoffs, but there were a series of sold-out games that he was worried, and he had heard the governor was going to shut those things down. So it all happened pretty quickly, but we all, I think, really wanted the same thing. We were all doing our honest best to get through this together. What
decision, you talked about making decisions, and you would go back on and do it all the same,
Sure.
But what decision scared you, if you can recall? What decision of which are you most proud?
I don't know that any decision that I made scared me. I declared a state of emergency here in Toledo. That was rare. I don't know that had been done often, but I did that, and that was in consultation with the law department. I remember
on whether or not you could,
well,
or how it is to be implemented.
How it is to be implemented, and whether the circumstances were met. And I knew it wasn't something that had happened often or maybe ever in the strong mayor form of government. So I don't know that there was a decision that scared me. I think the impact on Toledo was frightening based on decisions that I wasn't necessarily making, but that were happening in the world. So the around this time, a national publication, and I can't remember if it was the Heritage Foundation or the Hoover Institute or some DC-based think tank, ranked maybe the top 200 cities in the country that it believed, based on its formulas, would be most negatively affected by this. And of all of the cities in the country, 4 of the top 5 most negatively affected were predicted to be cities in Ohio, and we were 4th. Now that scared me. It wasn't a decision I made, but I was frightened by how this could impact Toledo for reasons that were maybe spiraling out of our control. And here's why that ranking said what it did. And I guess maybe I didn't realize this at the time. Having lived in Ohio, Toledo, my whole life essentially, I assumed that all cities, or I had thought that all cities were funded primarily by the income tax like we are. That's all I've ever known. The people growing up, I've always thought, you've got to pass the 0.75%, 0.25%. It's always an income tax. Come to find out, that is not how most cities in this country are funded. Ohio it might be unique. There might be 1 or 2 other states that do it our way, But the notion that municipal governments are funded with an income tax is very rare in this country. Most other cities are funded with a sales tax, property tax, some of the other menu of taxes. We in Ohio have, at least for 100 years, have been doing it by the income tax. And if there was a tax that you wouldn't want to be funded by at the beginning of COVID, it was the income tax, because fundamentally, nothing was changing about property values. The income you would receive from property revenue should be the same.
Right.
COVID had nothing to do with the value of your property.
But once the shutdown happened.
But when the government of the United States told people you are not allowed to go to work and earn an income, you bet that was going to affect cities like Toledo that rely on an income tax. So when I saw that ranking that had us as the 4th ranked city in the entire nation in terms of negative impact, that got my attention.
Yeah.
In terms of decisions I was proud of, I just think I was proud of how we all worked together truly in a apolitical, bipartisan spirit. The governor is a Republican. The 6 big city mayors that he convened a phone call with every day are Democrats, and yet politics never came up in those phone calls. And it really was just a spirit of how do we get through this moment. And I will say, even when I think back to things I'm proud of, just in general, I do reflect back with pride and a sense of longing, frankly. For those first couple weeks of COVID, it did seem like all of us, frankly, as a nation, were united for a time. Now, granted, we were united around something terrible, just like there was a period.
9/11.
We were united around 9/11. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was going to say. Sometimes terrible events have a way of uniting us. And there was a sense in those early days of unity, of neighbors looking out for neighbors, of people, good Samaritans.
Water crisis.
Everything like that. And it was disappointing, I guess, if your question pertains to the politics of this, how quickly, just like everything else it seems right now in this country, how quickly it devolved into politics, and whether or not you were getting vaccinated was somehow a ideological signal about whether you're a Democrat or Republican. It's just so disappointing that everything eventually turns into red state, blue state, Democrat, Republican, and I ended up being disappointed in that. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't sort of proud about how united we were in those early days. Those are my political memories of what happened.
When you see, and this will be the last on this topic, but when you see kind of the 5-year Monday morning quarterbacking as far as masking, as far as the shutdown is concerned, those things weren't needed. Where are you on that? Because have you had time to process and think that maybe it was too alarmist?
I don't know. Again, I go back to what I said, that we were making the very best decisions we could based on the information we had, being guided by science, and I think we would all make those same decisions now. Interestingly, in the early days of the crisis, even the same political voices who are now saying that it was alarmist and extreme were encouraging masks and business shutdowns. I mean, Trump himself declared a national emergency and recommended.
But I think back to protesters who were outside members of the health board, and
but that wasn't right away though. That was weeks, if not months later.
Right. But still questioning the shutdowns and that kind of thing.
No. That's what I mean when I talk about how this kind of became more, came political.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. I'm not a scientist or a health professional. I don't know. I still don't know if we as a nation know exactly what happened here. Where did this come from? Was it a lab in China? And
you still have questions about that in your mind?
I have questions about how it has. I don't know that has been settled in terms of how did it come?
New York Times came out with an opinion piece this past weekend, just saying that they now buy into an editorial saying they now buy into the fact it was released from a lab.
Okay, But even though, but that would.
But I don't want to get in the weeds with that.
No, but the point is, I don't know that that changes anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter if it came from a lab or came from the, a
I think that feeds
mosquito
into
bite.
I think that feeds into the argument of the people who were so up and against the shutdowns and up
Okay.
against the masks and that kind of thing.
Okay, but to me, it doesn't. I don't think it matters to me as much about how it started or where it came from. It seemed pretty real to me. I mean,
Yeah.
people were dying from
course.
it, and in fact, Toledo had the first official death in the state of Ohio. Mark Wagner Sr. was the first death in this state, so we felt it a little more personally here in Toledo than most other places. It doesn't matter to me where it started or whether this was a scheme by the Chinese government. I don't know. What I do know is that people in Toledo were dying, and that was the most important thing. And what's the best response to it? Should we vaccinate? Should we put masks on? All we could do then, and I think all we would do in the future if something like that happened again, is listen to the best science that exists and make the honest decisions we could. I guess I'm also reflecting back to, I mean, this is long before my time, but I know a little bit of the history, and look, there was a time when people in this country would routinely get polio, and at some point, the government, which I know is that's a negative to a lot of people, but I don't know, I can't remember. I don't know if it was Truman or Eisenhower, but someone said, "Hey, we have a vaccination now. It'll stop people from getting polio. Line up, and we'll give you a shot." My mom and dad both kind of actually still have like a little indentation.
Three marks, right?
Yeah, right in their thing. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. So what was? So, I guess my sense of history. I was aware that there was a time when Americans kind of rallied around and rolled up their sleeves, and I don't know, geez, President Truman says we need this if we don't want to get polio, and everyone, not very many people get polio anymore.
Let me ask you, obviously,
it's frustrating that something happened this time that prevented that sense of unity. Now, that being said, I don't know what was right or wrong. I do think that the media landscape has played a role here, that for better or for worse, there probably was an unhealthy monopoly back in 60 years ago when your choice was either Edward R. Murrow or Walter Cronkite, and I would still take that unhealthy monopoly every day over having 200 different people screaming at you on 200 different cable channels who aren't really reporting news, they're merely confirming whatever your worldview already is. I think that has fed into some of the conspiracies on all sides of the political aisle.
Yeah. Let me ask you about faith. And you and I graduated from St. Francis together, John as well, Eric.
I think the Pope is over my shoulder there
The
somewhere.
Pope is over your shoulder.
Yeah.
But I ask you in terms of, did you find times where you had to lean on your faith as far as family was concerned? Outside of this office, the mental burden, the mental strain that you had on you leading through this.
Sure, absolutely. In my faith, I don't talk about it much. I'm not one of those politicians.
I know you're not, and I think that's why it's interesting to dive into it.
But I tell you, the reason I decided to get into politics in the first place was because of the influence of a Catholic priest. I mean, I almost never talk about this, but you've somehow gotten me to reveal this. When I went away to college, I wanted to be you, believe it or not. I went to college wanting to be
in my line of work, not me.
I'm sorry, not you. I could never be as handsome, for instance. But no, I wanted to be a journalist. I thought maybe I'd be the one writing that article in the New York Times or whatever it might have been. But when I got there, I went to a Jesuit school up in Milwaukee, and I had to take an Intro to Political Science course to get my journalism degree. I didn't take political science at St. Francis, to the extent the word science is in the course title. I said, no, I'm not going to like this. But the professor we had, and this is not unusual at a place like Marquette, the professor happened to be a priest. I had to take the course to satisfy my core requirement, and he absolutely changed my life. Outside of my parents, he's the biggest influence in my life. He's the person who started to get me focused on the good that you could do through public service. He's very much someone. He's still with us. He's might be close to 80 now, but he came up.
What's his name?
His name is Father Tim O'Brien. And I didn't realize this at the time when you're a 19-year-old kid, in the front row taking notes of his political science class. But now that I reflect on it a little more, he's Irish, Catholic. He would have come of age at a time when the Kennedys were on the ascent and the Peace Corps and the Civil Rights Movement. And in terms of Catholicism, this is during the time of Vatican II, which is the Great Awakening in the Church and the idea, liberation theology. Frankly, for all the talk that there is sometimes in this country about the religious right, Father O'Brien would be part of the religious left, I suppose. Frankly, Pope Francis reminds me of.
But what did
Father
he do
O'Brien.
that flipped the switch?
He just talked about. He said, there are people in this world who make decisions that affect millions of homeless people and distribute millions of dollars to the poor and the dispossessed, and those people are going to be. Those folks make decisions. Wouldn't it be better if the people making those decisions were good people, ethical people, honest people? Father would say religious people, but I think you can make the same argument without adding the religion. But when you're an 18-year-old kid from Toledo, Ohio, who went to Regina Caeli Grade School and St. Francis High School and, is as Catholic as the day is long, that's an inspiring message. And here is someone, frankly, who merged the two things that you're never supposed to discuss politely at Thanksgiving dinner, religion and politics. Mm-hmm. And he was making the case, again, probably inspired by the Kennedys, and that, if you do it for the right reasons, you can make a real difference here. So you could go work at Habitat for Humanity and work all week and build one home, and that's great. Or you could go into this vocation and make decisions that with one signature will affect 10,000 homeless people. And it's not for everyone, and goodness knows not everyone I've met in this business adheres to that standard. But to me, at that moment in my life, that was a changing point. And so my life started going in a different direction. I've kept in touch. Father O'Brien, we flew him into town here, and he married us right over there at St. Pat's Historic Church. When I got elected, he came in and swore me, and I still keep in touch with him. He is absolutely the reason I am here in this chair. I do joke sometimes that, whenever I screw something up, there's a Catholic priest in Milwaukee, Wisconsin to blame. So you bet my faith was an important part of me making those decisions, and especially through the lens of a dad, because I'm a dad, and my kids were, 13 and 15 maybe, so they weren't little, but they were, that was a tough age, I think, for this to be happening. There were things that should have been a part of their high school experience that weren't happening, dances and sporting events. My son, played hockey, and, my daughter played volleyball, but, was also, they both are a little bit into theater. Well, there wasn't a lot of theatrical performances or sporting events during that time. So part of me, as a dad, wanted to make sure that, we were talking a lot as a family about how, we get through this moment and why we're doing it and how we make these decisions. And
do you pray? Did you pray?
Yeah,
Do you have moments of being alone?
Every day.
Did you?
Yes, every day, usually in the evenings, for me. When the day is done, sometimes it's late, I will, sort of sit by myself and, I'll have a conversation. I'll have a conversation with God, and I do that often, actually. But during those days,
going back,
during those days, I thought a lot. And again, I don't enjoy talking about it because there's nothing in this world, truly, that I detest more than those politicians who wear the "What would Jesus do" bracelet while they run around and make decisions that Jesus would never do. I'm going to wear my "What would Jesus do" bracelet, and I'm going to cut funding from Head Start and, eliminate food stamps and make sure everyone who wants one can have an assault weapon.
But why do you feel it's not kosher to talk about things like this in your position?
Because I suspect that people would think that I'm doing it for cynical reasons, or, oh, he's just trying, he's trying to, it's performative, he's trying to show that he's, I don't know.
You didn't ask me to ask this question.
Fair enough, that's fair, which is why I'm asking,
Yeah.
which is why I'm answering.
Yeah. But back to just
Yeah,
drawing
so, no,
on your
I
faith
did-
during those times.
I do this, again, this is the reason I do what I do. It is because of Father O'Brien. It's because of my faith. It adheres to my interpretation of the Gospels and what we're called to do. So,
And in those conversations, were you asking for guidance?
yes, and they helped guide me toward the decisions we made, which were conversations that, in my judgment, benefited the community. If we are knee deep into the religion conversation, I'll put it this way: I've done this at religious gatherings, not often, but a couple times I've done it, and it always has the effect that I want it to. I say to myself, let's join hands and say the Lord's Prayer, but I will contrive some reason that I'm asking to do this, and everyone always falls for it, by the way. I said, but let's replace all of the third-person pronouns with first-person pronouns. So this is not going to be the our Father; it's going to be the my Father. And so we start, my Father, and then the first half of it is fine. Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as in heaven. The second half of that prayer,
Give us my day.
give me this day my daily bread, and forgive me my trespasses as I forgive those, and on and on. So as we're doing this, the first half of the prayer, everyone is in unison. They've been doing this prayer their whole lives. And I do this actually sometimes in rooms where there are priests. They don't quite know where I'm going with this, but they play along.
Yeah.
When we get to that second half of the prayer, the room is full of a cacophony of sound, because people out of habit are saying the prayer properly. And so what it sounds like is a terrible symphony with discordant notes, and it's just a garbled job. It sounds terrible. The prayer ends. And then what I say is this: didn't that sound awful? Didn't that sound wrong? That was wrong. It didn't sound right, did it? Because in fact it isn't. This world isn't about me, I, mine. We are all called to do things for us. This is our relationship with God and our relationship with the community, and this. So did that sound wrong? Yes, that's the point. That's not how we're supposed to be living our time on this earth.
Yeah.
We are supposed to be doing this together, holding hands. And I can tell you how a lot of those priests come up and say, you should have studied theology. So it's a great, it's not just a political shtick, it's real. It's how I look at the world. Now, goodness knows there are plenty of Catholics who are on the other side of the ideological spectrum. But I just come back to the Gospels, to the Gospel of Matthew, to the 25th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, to the Sermon on the Mount. We are talking about someone in Jesus Christ, just so we know, who quite literally said, it is a sin to possess wealth. That it's easier for a camel to pass the eye of a needle, or a rich man to inherit the kingdom of heaven. The only time he ever interacted with commerce in the Gospels is when he was tipping over the tables of the money changers. For all of the snide talk about how the politician you dislike is a communist. Sometimes and I got a lot. Oh boy, Obama's a Marxist, communist Kenyan. I'll say, you know what, Uncle Tom, because we all have an Uncle Tom who will give you that line of things. He actually is not a socialist. But even if he were, he'd have a long way to go before he could even begin to scratch the amount of socialism practiced by history's most famous socialist. And Uncle Tom would say, who, Stalin? I'd say, no, Jesus Christ. The guy who lived in a commune. So I say these things provocatively because I knew it would upset Uncle Tom and get him to think about things. But I think about this stuff all the time. And now, by the way, Do I meet that standard? No. Do I possess wealth? Yes. I fail every day. That's the point. We only, in our faith, only Jesus, God himself, can rise to that standard. But it doesn't mean that's what we should be, but we should be aspiring to that.
Yeah.
We should at least aspire to that. And so I fail in the standard. If, as Jesus says, it is sinful to possess any wealth whatsoever, you bet I fail, and we all do. But let's not take our eyes off the prize. Let's not take our eyes off what we're trying to do here. And so to bring this back full circle, look, I understood that, boy, there's going to be a business here that is going to be disrupted, and boy, it's going to be hard, Joe Napoli, to meet your bottom line if you're going to have to cancel the next 32 consecutive sellouts, you know. And the restaurants, who, you know, it's hard to, you know, belly up to the bar and,
right.
you know, whatever, when you have to socially distance.
And the health workers and what they went through and whatnot.
But I kept coming back to, frankly, the Gospels, the greater good, doing unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That is, you bet. Doesn't mean I made the right decision every time? No, probably not, because I am imperfect and I fail to meet the standard and I am human.
But you did find
But
yourself
that is the
drawing
goal.
on it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let me wrap up by asking you from a personal standpoint. And you touched on it a little bit with your 13-year-old and 15-year-old at the time. I was a father of 3. I saw the effect, the impact it was having on the kids not being in school, having to learn virtually, the social dynamic that existed for the kids. Looking back, what do you see as the impact it had on your family and it had on your ability to parent?
I think I am fortunate that I don't know that the impact on in fact, I'm certain that the impact on my family was not as great as it was to many other families.
Who tragically lost members. Councilman
yes.
Martinez, we talked to him this week, and I mean, the tragedy that befell him, and obviously the Wagners you brought up.
Yeah, and though, you know, there's maybe not, you have to draw a little bit of a line here, but I'm going to draw it because the new numbers just came in today, and it might seem off topic, but probably one of the biggest consequences of COVID in this nation was an incredible spike in crime, violent crime, and homicides all around the country. There's a lot of reasons for that. There were no jury trials. When you have to social distance, you can't have a jury, et cetera. So we had 71 homicides in 2021, I think. Today, in the middle of March, so far, we've had 3. Okay, now this is not a moment to spike the ball in the end zone, but homicides are 73% lower this year than they were last year, and last year they were 18% lower. When I mention this now, not to say, oh, look how well we're doing reducing crime. No, what I'm saying is COVID caused crime to spike, and now the further we get away from COVID, crime has gone down. But you talk about negative impacts. Yes, there's the obvious, the people who died from COVID, but the impact, and so much of the violence we saw was happening among young people who were terribly disrupted. They didn't have the social support and the network that they need. They weren't able to go to games or concerts or whatever kids do. I worry that for the rest of their lives, there will be a cohort of kids who now are, I don't know, maybe they're 17 years old now, maybe, who just will never be able to make up the 2 years of lost classroom time. You know, there were a number of schools who weren't in the classroom for 2 years. And you can try to make up for some of that digitally, but you know, there's a digital divide. There are kids.
But your family specifically.
Right, I am only saying all of this to say, whatever negative impacts happen to my family pale in comparison to the families that saw the violent crime, that saw literal death, that saw educational attainment drop. I would say that what my family felt were inconveniences, but nothing like the tragedies that so many families felt. So again, there was no playbook, just like there was no playbook for me as a mayor, there was no playbook for me as a dad either. We just tried to talk it out the best we could, and you know, to make up, you know, I don't know, we found ourselves playing more board games maybe than we did before. And, you know, that's not a bad thing looking back either. So.
Did it force you to be a different parent? Have you maintained that level of parenting? Are you a different parent outside of COVID?
I think so, probably. I think maybe, you know, some of the conversations we had during those times have helped my relationship with my kids grow. And now maybe they were destined to grow anyhow. You know, maybe they're, you know.
We'll never know.
We'll never know.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm a better parent having gone through that. And I'd like to think that they think I'm a better dad. I don't know. But I feel my relationship with my family is as strong as it's ever been. And I would say that is the case either despite COVID or maybe because of it. I don't know. I don't know if any one of us know the answer to that question.
In your State of the City, you mentioned toward the end, you talked about one of the initiatives that you had planned right before COVID hit.
Yeah.
Take it off Toledo. You have taken it off. Talk a little bit about getting back to that point.
Yeah.
Is that still an important initiative for you? Because obviously COVID, as we look back 5 years, took that away.
Yeah. Well, I think the context in terms of why I brought that up in my speech is important. That was toward the end of my speech, and I talked about, and your viewers may disagree or whatever, but at least this was my point. I talked about how seriously I take the promises that I make Toledoans. And by my judgment, everything that I talked about when I first ran for this office in 2017, we have either kept that promise or we are on course to keeping it. I mean, like everyone. I talked about even things people have forgotten about now. When I was running for mayor, there was the regional water.
First time or second time?
First time.
Okay.
Our suburbs were on the verge of leaving us and getting their water from elsewhere. No one thought we could do it, but I said we will create a regional water system, and we did. I talked about growing the size of the police force, and we did. I talked about, you know, I kind of went through a list of all the things I've done, and, you know, political opponents may agree or disagree. But the reason I was mentioning these things is that to me, again, I don't want to be one of those politicians, you can't trust a word they say. To me, I reflect on this stuff all the time. I remember exactly what I promised, and it is important to me that as I complete my second term, I've kept my promise. I really have. Now, you could argue that there's more we need to do, and I agree, but in terms of the commitments I made, I take them seriously, and I feel that we're making progress. So in that context, I said, you know what? There's one promise I wasn't doing very well on, and that was the promise to lose a little weight and be a little more healthy. I think everyone remembers the version of me that ran for office in 2017. It was a larger version of what you're seeing now, and I wanted to keep that promise too. And so we kicked off an initiative called Take It Off Toledo, where leading by example, I wanted to get healthy and lose a lot of weight, and the idea was we would set up a sort of a there'd be an app where people could sign in and track the weight. And we thought that we could lose cumulatively 1 million pounds. They had done something similar to this in Oklahoma City, and I got to know the mayor a little bit and kind of gave the idea. So that was the idea. We launched that, and about 2.5 months later, COVID began, and understandably, we got distracted with some other priorities. And frankly, looking back, it's my understanding that during COVID, most people actually gained weight. So my point in bringing that up was that was a promise I was not doing very well keeping, and it nagged at me, it bothered me. I never forgot about it because I don't want to be one of these folks who makes all kinds of wild promises and doesn't follow through. I really am doing my best to keep my promises, and that was the one that I just was upset at myself that we weren't able to do. And even though there was pretty good reason, COVID was a pretty good reason, it still bothered me. So long after the promise was made, and maybe after just about everyone had forgotten about it, I hadn't forgotten about it. So about a year ago, I decided, you know what, there's still time to keep this promise too.
Yeah.
So even though the rest of the city isn't signing up to our weight loss app and we're not adding up pounds cumulatively, the heck with it, I'll do it myself. And I've been fortunate, and I don't know, it does seem like there's a little less of me to vote for now than there was a couple years ago. So that's why I brought it up. And people have remarked on how different I look, and that's true. And that's a good thing. To me, what I focus on is just how much better I feel. I mean, I know it's a cliche. I just have so much more energy and just more pep in my step. I've always been sort of optimistic. I'm even more optimistic now. I just feel good. And to me, and people say, well, how do you do it? Yeah, I'm eating better and eating a little less. But for me, and I'm no dietitian, check with the doctor. To me, it's been exercise. I have really gotten addicted to exercise, in particular, riding my bike. I ride my bike 20 miles a day, like every day. No days off. Mm-hmm. Last year, I rode about 6,000 miles on my bike, which I think is like Boston to LA and back twice. But I'm mixing some running. I did the Glass City Marathon last year. We're going to do it again here April 27th. So I guess I'm learning as I get older about myself. I probably have an addictive personality. And I suppose of all the things you could be addicted to, well, at least I'm not addicted to drinking or gambling or any of those terrible vices. If the worst thing I can say about myself is that I've gotten addicted to exercise, I guess I'll take that. So
did somebody tell you got to get in shape?
Well, people have been telling me that for a long time.
Yeah.
And I knew it. No one had to tell me that. I mean, I knew it, and people would.
From a health standpoint, but not just from a visual standpoint. Did you have heart problems? Did your blood pressure up?
No. It was never. I never, fortunately.
Diabetic?
Nope. No. I can honestly, I'm not diabetic. Never been diabetic. Even when I was heavier than I am now, I was always fortunate that my internals were good, as they say. So in fact, there's actually a date stamp to prove this, if you feel the need to prove it. When I ran in 2017, they don't seem to do it anymore, but that's back when the Blade would always make candidates, get a letter from their doctor. Mm-hmm. I don't know that they do that anymore, but in 2017 I did, and even though I was a lot heavier then than I am now, my doctor's letter in 2017 said, hey, he can stand to lose some weight, but cholesterol's good, blood pressure's good. No, I'm very fortunate in that way, and I think I have family history to thank, that my sort of internal combustion system was always good, even when I was a little heavier than I am now. But I also knew, and had doctors tell me that, all right, you're in your mid to late 40s, you're okay now, but if you keep carrying this extra weight, there'll be certain cancers that you might be more likely to get.
Sure.
Than you. So, no, truthfully,
But even with all the tools that are out there, and I'm talking medicine and whatnot, you have not taken anything to help you get to this level.
No, I take, no, that's not the case. I don't take like Ozempic or, some people think I'm doing that, but no, there is a, I forget what it is called. It's got I should know the name. It's not, what's the other one? Ozempic?
Yeah.
It is a shot. It's a shot thing that I do, but I don't, so I do that. But I have been doing that for a while.
Okay. Specifically geared toward weight.
I think so. I think that's what it is. It's called Zepbound. Zepbound is what it is called.
Zepbound.
Zepbound. Zepbound. I think that's in my letter from 2017 also. But I had been doing that for a while.
Gotcha.
And this weight loss really didn't kick in until I really started exercising. So again, I'm not a dietitian, not a doctor. I don't know how much was the shot, how much is it?
Yeah.
Probably a little bit of everything. But I can tell you, I was taking that shot without seeing much weight loss. It was the exercise. No, maybe they're working together. Maybe the exercise with the shot, but who knows?
We're getting off topic.
Yeah. But anyhow, no. But I don't know. I am what I am.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Wade, thank you.